If you look into this grave, you will remember it the longest day you live. Thank you.
In case you pass out, that's tough.
Welcome back to Joe's Drive-In. It's the history of horror, and we've finally made it to the 80s. The horror movies of this decade were different. The 80s brought us some of the craziest, messiest, most insane horror films of all time. But this time, we're going to wind it down to the beginning of the decade with 1980's Friday the 13th. The scenario is classic slasher film. A bunch of teenagers go to a secluded location, in this case, Camp Crystal Lake. They get stalked by a mysterious silent killer and get picked off one by one until there's a sole survivor. As a side note, from what I can tell, this is the first horror film set at a summer camp, which I think is pretty interesting. Anyway, it's your typical stuff. But there's a twist. See, the locals call Crystal Lake Camp Blood.
Camp Blood? They're opening that place again?
You're going to Camp Blood, ain't you?
Years ago, a child named Jason Voorhees drowned while attending the camp. Shortly after, 2 of the counselors were murdered, leading to the camp's closure. Years later, the camp is being fitted for reopening on Jason's birthday, and camp counselors are getting killed again by an unseen murderer. Could this be Jason's vengeful spirit haunting the campgrounds? Well, not quite. I wanted to keep the ending a secret just in case anyone hasn't seen it yet, but it's too good not to share, and I figure the twist is fairly common knowledge at this point. The thing is, Jason is not actually in this movie. It is true that Jason is the iconic face of the Friday the 13th franchise, but in this movie, Jason's mother, Mrs. Voorhees, is the killer. She's out for revenge, as she blames the camp counselor's neglect on Jason's death.
You let him drown. You never paid any attention. Look what you did to him. Look what you did to him!
This isn't revealed until one of the last scenes of the movie. It can be very surprising for those unfamiliar with the series. Jason has become such an icon that you go into this movie expecting the hockey-masked killer, but you get his mom instead. Jason shows up in part 2, and his mask doesn't even show up until part 3. It's very interesting that for a series so ingrained in pop culture, the most famous things about it don't fully show up until the 3rd movie. This evolution is a trait unique to Jason, as opposed to his fellow slashers, who stay pretty much the same in each movie. Speaking of changes, Jason really knows how to switch it up. He's been in 3D, he's had a final chapter and a new beginning, he's been to hell, he's taken Manhattan, he's gone into space, and he's fought Freddy Krueger. Don't worry, he's coming up. Anyway, enough about Jason because he's not in this movie. His mother is a very surprising reveal, and you would never see it coming. The last person you would expect to be doing any of this stuff is some old lady. It's even made more surprising when you think about some of these kills. She must have had a ton of strength. Speaking of the kills, Friday the 13th took what Halloween did and turned it up quite a bit. Kills are more in your face and a lot messier thanks to Tom Savini's impressive effects work. The main highlight of the movie is the arrow through Kevin Bacon's neck. Side note, Kevin Bacon is yet another famous actor whose early career is rooted in horror, as this is only his 5th movie. Going back to the kills, compared to Halloween, they're a lot more in your face and shocking. Unfortunately, they're apparently too good. This movie, and the franchise in general, have struggled with numerous issues of censorship. To fit the MPAA's standards, a lot of them had to be shortened or cut short from the original intention, leading to a lot of different cuts of the movie as well as lost footage. Friday the 13th was a massive success and really pushed the envelope for horror content back in the day, easily earning its place in the big 3 top horror franchises of all time. I'll admit it's my personal least favorite of the 3, but that doesn't mean it's not good and it's still important. Friday the 13th is well worth a watch. Check it out.
Friday the 13th.
On the topic of the big 3, well, there's just one more left to talk about, so join me tomorrow for a bit of a nightmare.
Pleasant nightmares, friends. Good midnight to you.